Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, SCS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime on trending criminal cases. And this one has become part of the zeitgeist, if you will, of American culture in a lot of ways, with the accused, Bryan Kohberger, being a scary, creepy, that's how he's been described, accused killer. And of course, the victims here, you've got Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. Tonight, we're going to go and dive back into some of the new information that has come out. Shout out to my man, Kevin Fixler, with the Idaho Statesman. I invited him back on, but he is taking some well-deserved time off. But he will be back on the show, and he and I will be doing quite a bit together. Leading up to this trial, which is set to kick off toward the very end of July with jury selection and opening statements scheduled for around August 11th. So here to break it all down, got our best guests, and one of the fan favorites here, Josh Ritter. You know him as host of Courtroom Confidential, and also a criminal defense attorney, also a father, also a husband, and also former LA Prosecutor of the Year. Ritter and I commiserate about juggling multiple things in this life. And I guess that's part of life. Next up, a man who does it without any whining, like yours truly, is Greg Skordas. He comes to us from the great state of Utah, started as a public defender, and has ended up as one of the more formidable criminal defense attorneys in the great state of Utah. And I am planning to cover the Corey Richins trial, where I hope to meet Greg Skordas in person. And certainly, last but not least, is Tara Malik, who is a defense attorney coming to us out of Boise, Idaho. She went to law school at the University of Idaho, knows the campus well, knows the story well. And look at this, Sherry Douglas already in the chat. So hello to everybody. Happy Monday. Just a quick reminder, tomorrow, Donna Adelson, which is our OG story, she is back in court. She's got a status hearing. It's unclear whether or not the judge will go over any motions. We will take it live. At that time, I will be forced, I don't want to say gunpoint, it will not be gunpoint, but forced at family point, in a drive up to Orlando, and not to cover stuff on Stearns, but to go to Disney, which I've been assigned for the next 2 days. Don't worry about me. It is spring break for the entire public school system in the state of Florida, and every single one of them will be at Disney along with myself and my kids the next 2 days. Let's put it this way. I'd rather be hosting a podcast. Sorry, kiddos. Sorry, kids. They're all listening, so I apologize. But it'll be a great time. Don't you worry. So, on to Bryan Kohberger. And tomorrow night I will get there by 5 o'clock to host a show on what happens with Donna Adelson tomorrow in court. So, Josh Ritter, I know you actually, I think, had Kevin Fixler from the Idaho Statesman on Courtroom Confidential. And, he's kind of the reporter of record here. He's been all over it. He's based in Boise. He's been in Moscow multiple times. One of the newer, elements of this entire case is incredibly creepy, incredibly disturbing, and it is a selfie of Bryan Kohberger, which is allegedly time-stamped at 10:31 a.m. November 13th, which would put it basically 6 hours and change or whatever after the murders of these 4 University of Idaho students. The COE is going to get that shot up. I know she will in a moment. But when you saw this selfie, and it's on our thumbnail, the first thought that ran through your mind as a criminal defense attorney, as a former prosecutor?
Well, it's incredibly creepy when you don't know the surrounding circumstances of it to begin with. I mean, he's just got this very bizarre kind of expressionless smile, if that's a thing, look on his face with the thumbs up. It's awkward that it appears as though he's inside of his own bathroom in front of a shower. The whole thing is just bizarre. Then you put that in the context of that is likely within hours of when prosecutors believe these horrible murders took place. And so then viewing his expression, the thumbs up, everything else about it takes on a whole nother meaning that is far more disturbing and creepy. But what I love most about why we're now seeing this photograph is that the prosecution was using it to respond to a defense motion about the reference to bushy eyebrows. And so they wanted to, okay, fine. Let's bring in a photograph of our suspect most close in time to when we believe these murders took place to in fact see what were the condition of his eyebrows at that time. And what I love about that is that's a great excuse for why they're showing this and attaching this to emotion, but it is entirely for everything else that I just said. It's entirely to just show us what, in my view, appears to be an absolute psychopath, if this is in fact within hours of just having stabbed to death 4 college students. I'm obviously using the term psychopath. I'm no expert in the more general way, but I look at this and I go, I don't know if you're going to see something much more disturbing that's connected to a crime that doesn't show blood, right? We don't see any dead bodies. We don't see a bloody knife. Yet just this image of him with that bizarre look on his face and that thumbs up and the weird way in which he's posed inside of a bathroom within hours of a murder, it's nightmare fuel.
CM Kathy, thank you, Josh. Yeah, bone chilling. That's a good way to put it. If he is convicted, which there's a lot of evidence pointing in that direction, this might go down in the annals of true crime history as one of the most disturbing. John Wayne Gacy, Bob Motta's father, represented him. You've got the photo. There's a few photos, but this one is about as weird and creepy as it gets. Tara Malik, Josh brought up a point. It has to do with discussion of bushy eyebrows, which we'll get into a little bit later. But when I looked at this closely, at least on the right eyebrow, it almost looks, and I don't know, like he was like trimming the eyebrows, shaving the eyebrows, maybe because he knows he's got really distinctive eyebrows, but not as a lawyer, as a observer of human people and as a woman, would you classify these as bushy eyebrows? How would you describe these eyebrows?
They are very distinctive. I personally would call them bushy eyebrows. It's different features on different people stand out, right? And first thing that you see when you look at him are his very distinctive and they're broad eyebrows. And so if you're going to describe someone, think of a different case, right? Think of if you're witnessing a car accident, you're going to go describe the car that you see that hit the other car. You're going to look at the most distinctive features of that vehicle. Just like when you're going to go describe a person, it's the most distinctive things that jump out at you that are unique. And they are. His eyebrows are distinctive. And that's my non-lawyer opinion. That's from a female perspective, non-lawyer.
I love it. From Cheswick here, Joel, you're looking too shaven. Oh, speaking about bushy eyebrows, once in a while I will trim the old when my kids tell me it's too white, and then I get self-conscious and I start to trim. Ned Smith here. Joel, did you have to mortgage your house? I had to sell my soul. Why is it that America worships rodents? You got Mickey Mouse, and then you've got Chuck E. Cheese. They both make a lot of money, and they're both annoying to adults, but it's one man's opinion. So back to the selfie here. Greg Skordas, to you. The government is going to try to argue here that it is some kind of trophy. From a legal perspective, is that considered like speculative? Is it evidentiary? Will the judge say you're prejudicing the defendant here? How do you see this?
It's an interesting argument that the state makes and wants to bring in, and I'm glad Josh is here as a former prosecutor, because it's really consistent with certain crimes that individuals will do something like this, will do something to draw attention to themselves. I mean, we have instances of arsonists who show up at the scene and watch the ambulance trying to and the fire trucks trying to put out the fire. We have homicide cases where people will sort of keep a trinket or keep something to remind them or to put them back in that place, back in that time. And so this Selfie, to me, and I mean, he's presumed innocent, of course, but if he had committed a homicide a few hours earlier, this Selfie takes creepy to a whole new level, because it's almost like, yeah, I did it. I pulled it off. And it's not uncommon for people in this situation, whether they're psychopaths or whatever they are, to do something like this. I don't know that the government's going to be able to argue that particular relevance as a part of this. I mean, the picture speaks for itself. Whether they can say this is a trophy, I don't know that the judge will let them do that, but maybe the jury will make that conclusion themselves.
Yeah. And Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this was taken at a time in the morning where the surviving two roommates still had not called 911, I believe. And he is said to have driven by the house that morning, although the defense says otherwise. But that would kind of, I mean, in my own opinion, this would play into sort of, like the whole trophy notion. If 911 wasn't called, maybe he thinks I completely got away with this. No one has even noticed. Maybe he didn't know about the surviving two roommates. Yeah,
it could be that he's monitoring. I don't know if he had a scanner. We haven't heard any evidence of that he's monitoring police traffic, or that he's just monitoring the news and realizes that it's now hours later and no one's called 911. If this was, I think you said, taken according to prosecutors somewhere around 10 or 11 in the morning, they did not call 911 till closer till noon. So it could be in that same window of time where the police had not yet been alerted. And then it was, hours after that before the media even got involved. But one thing that I thought was interesting about what you had said earlier about what will the defense say about this photograph, and is it prejudicial, trying to keep it out? What's the relevance of it? What I love about it is, first of all, it's squarely relevant because the defense has made it relevant. They're calling into question this idea of bushy eyebrows. So, okay, great. What would be the most relevant piece of evidence to show the condition of his eyebrows close to the period of the murders? Here's a photograph. Now it's squarely relevant. Well, is it prejudicial? There is nothing prejudicial about this photograph when you're just looking at it. All of its prejudicial value comes from everything that you're thinking about the context of this photograph. So to argue that somehow this is going to persuade jurors in an inappropriate way by just taking a look at a man with a thumbs up, I don't see how you get that argument. But obviously, I think the jurors, and if they don't connect those dots themselves, the prosecutors will make that argument in closing arguments, that this man right here, this celebratory man with the thumbs up and the grin on his face, is someone who just took 4 lives all of a few hours earlier. That is how he reacted to this whole thing. I mean, it's incredibly impactful. And I don't see a way that the defense can keep it out at this point.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I mean, it's one of the things that I still don't fully understand. I'm not sure that anyone does. People have theories on it, is how there was, just how there was so little blood, apparently. That kind of puzzles me. When you're looking at this photo, Tara, like, if you are the government, like, how do you present this photo to the jurors? And what, Josh talking about that in and of itself, it's not prejudicial at all. So if you're the government and you want to introduce this, how do you sort of bring it up to the jurors?
Well, the main issue in this case is identification. Who was there? Who was the perpetrator of these crimes, right? So in order to do that, the prosecution doesn't have, from what we know right now, they don't have a witness who says, I saw this man in this house. What they have is a witness who is likely going to testify and say, I saw a person who had bushy eyebrows, who is of this approximate height, this approximate build, and then they're going to piece together the rest of it with the other pieces of information, the car, for instance, the cell phone data, to establish identity. So that's the way that they're going to go about presenting the evidence. I will mention that in the motion in limine that was filed by the defense to exclude the bushy eyebrow comment or introduction of that, the defense brought up 2 points, 2 reasons to exclude it. The first was what Josh was talking about, whether it's prejudicial or not to introduce this and say bushy eyebrows. But the second issue was reliability. So, and the argument by the defense is that the description, the witness who's going to testify about the bushy eyebrows or seeing the bushy eyebrows can't be relied upon because, according to them, her testimony is filled with statements, or not her testimony, excuse me, her statements to the police along the way during different periods of time were filled with uncertainty about what she did and did not see. So there was some question as to what she saw during those early morning hours. And so it's two-pronged, right? So the prosecution now has to fight both of those things. Is it prejudicial? And is there some question as to the reliability of the evidence before it goes before this jury?
That's really interesting. Greg Skordas, I'm wondering, like insider baseball here. So if you're his defense and you were, Greg was once a public defender, when you come across this photo, do you ask your client about it? Do you go up to Bryan Kohberger and say, why'd you take this? You took this that morning. I mean, do you want those answers, or do you try to avoid that? Like I'm trying to avoid Disney World.
I would probably ask him what he was doing, what he was thinking, in part because at some point, if this is shown to a jury, and it probably is relevant, as Tara said, it probably will come in, and it's not unduly prejudicial. The jury's going to wonder what he was thinking and why he would take it at such an awkward time, and what he was giving the thumbs up about. I mean, if I was prosecuting this case, and I know that's not your question, I'd have this photograph in front of the jury for the whole 3-month trial because it's just so creepy. I mean, it just let them. It's like an autopsy photo. It's that creepy. Yeah. But the defense is just going to I don't know. You may have to explain it at some point if you put your client on the stand. What were you thinking? What were you excited about? What was going on? Oh, it was spring break. I was ready to go home. I was happy to do this or that. I don't know what he's going to say. But in the context of the homicide and the timing of this, it's bizarre. And I can see why the defense is fighting to keep it out, but I don't see how they can do that. It's certainly consistent with what a witness described the eyebrows, and that alone probably makes it admissible.
Yeah. Again, this is, I mean, it kind of reminds me of Psycho, like the movie. And by the way, that word's not going to be allowed to be used. Apparently, we're going to get into that in a little while. But Josh Ritter in the photo, you can see he's wearing like earbuds or earphones. He's, as you said, standing in front of a shower, kind of blocking that shower head there. The thumbs up, and he's got this weird smile. He also looks, to me, he looks leaner than we've seen him. I mean, there's like space in his collar. He has his top button buttoned up. It is just beyond bizarre. I'm curious because what Greg just said kind of stood out to me. He said if he was prosecuting the case and you're a prosecutor of the year, he would have this photo up for the entire 3 months. Is there, I don't know, trick is not the right word, but what would you do to follow Greg's strategy? I mean, how could you get this? Can you get it in more than just a single time? Like, can you get this photo in multiple times so it really kind of penetrates the jurors' minds?
I think there's clever ways that you could get it in. Certainly when you're asking, I mean, even in the testimony that the defense is trying to impeach by saying that this one surviving roommate, that, she even says that she was intoxicated. She herself cannot give her admits that she has memory issues. She herself says she can't give a real description of the face of the person. All of that, as Tara pointed out, they're going to go, okay, great. Well, was he describe what you can describe. Well, I can give you kind of general height, build. I can tell you perhaps the race of the person, and I can tell you about their eyebrows. And then they slam up this photo and they say, great, is everything that you're describing consistent with the person that you see photographed here? Yes, it is. Do you see the eyebrows in this photograph? Is that consistent with what you remember that evening? Yes, it is. And so she's essentially then doing an ID of the defendant without doing an ID of the defendant, and at the same time making this photograph admissible. And if they really wanted to drive it home, as Greg was saying, any opportunity that they're having someone identify the defendant, they could just go ahead and have them identify this photograph. And as long as they're able to then tie that photograph to the defendant, they can put up that photograph every time they want to make an ID in court. And I agree with Greg that there's just a haunting nature about this photograph, and it's everything about it. It's first of all, it's the surrounding context, but like you pointed out, why is he in a bathroom? Why is he wearing earbuds? Why does he have that look on his face? Why is the top button of his shirt buttoned? I mean, everything about it is just so creepy and bizarre. And I agree with you. He looks a little more lean. He looks a little more pale than we've seen him. Yeah. But everything about it, if the jurors are at the point of being convinced that this is the man involved, they are going to be losing sleep over the fact that the man that they believe committed these murders has this look on his face within hours of having stabbed 4 students.
Yeah, brutally stabbed him. And Ned Smith says he looks like he's camouflaged into the tile, which is like a taupe color, and it's true. He looks like sickly. Tara, one of the battles that's going to take place is over cell phone data, right? So they've got this alibi, and we'll get into a little more detail on that later on. But it basically, they have cell phone pings, the government does, placing him near the scene of the crime around 9 a.m. Now, the defense is saying that's not the case, so that there's going to be a battle over experts there. And then he's back at his Pullman apartment. But, if the jurors hear that he was right near this house at 1122 King, literally like an hour before this picture, that's going to influence them quite a bit. So I guess the cell phone data is also going to be really critical, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the prosecution is building this case, right? We're building it with all these little pieces of evidence that we have, and we're putting it together. And what the prosecution is doing is reducing reasonable doubt. They're proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt. So what do they have to do? They have to do the opposite of that. They have to remove other doubt that it could be somebody else. So the cell phone data is going to be really critical, that he was in the vicinity or he was nearby. The defense is going to be, attacking that, poking holes, separately. I know we're going to talk about it separately, but they've identified a person who's an expert who is going to be opining differently about the cell phone data and where Kohberger was at the time. Defense is trying to use that person as an alibi to meet the requirements of an alibi in this case, which, we'll see if that works or not. But absolutely, his location is going to go a long ways in convincing a jury about whether or not he's the guy.
I'm just looking at this comment. Obviously, the dark circles. I mean, he does. I don't know if he looks tired. He just looks bizarre. But here, Psycho, the movie, which is what I said a moment ago, the iconic slashing shower scene, and this could very well be his reference to that movie, which is super duper creepy. What is this? Why would he give the thumbs up if it's after he returned to the house but wasn't able to retrieve the sheaf? Maybe because he's proud in a very sick, twisted, demented way that he was able to stab to death these 4 people, which is what the government says was what he was there to do. Steve Goncalves, the father of Kaylee Goncalves, he weighed in on this, and the COE is going to get us some sound from him in a moment. She's loading that up. While we're waiting for that, again, so it's DM. We're not using her name, but her name's been out there, and she is, from all accounts, absolutely traumatized by this. she's the one who gave this bushy eyebrows description, Josh, and the defense again is saying, look, it's basically prejudicial, and she's an artist, and so she draws portraits and stuff. So they're saying that she probably was maybe mixing him up or referencing one of her own portraits, or she herself was biased, and the government saying no, she's actually more observant, she would notice something like this, it's probably a more reliable description. Is this an expected feud between the defense and the government? Who wins this one? Because I think I have to agree with the latter. If you're an artist and you draw faces, you probably will notice someone's eyebrows before someone else, maybe, possibly.
Yeah, and you know, good luck to the defense on trying to make that argument. I mean, they're listen, I don't blame them or hold it against them for trying their best to do whatever they can, but I mean, the point of this identification, kind of to Tara's point, is not so much that she's going to positively identify Kohberger. There's never going to be a moment where they say, do you see that person sitting in the room? And she points over to the defense table and says, that's the man. I doubt that. But what she did is she gave a description that is consistent with the defendant. And most importantly, it's not inconsistent with the defendant. So there would be a major problem here for the prosecution if she said, well, he was about 5'2" and really heavy set. Okay, now we got issues. The person she's identifying is not consistent. Well, lo and behold, the person whose DNA they find on the knife sheath happens to match the general description given by a eyewitness who was in the home, even to the point of a bizarre, the only outstanding feature she could describe was bushy eyebrows, and lo and behold, this guy happens to have what many might characterize as bushy eyebrows. Same thing for the geolocation of the phone. It's not even so much that they cannot place him at the crime scene, but the defense cannot place him somewhere else during the time of the murders, which, you know, lo and behold, the guy that happens to have his DNA on the knife sheath is also not, you know, in somewhere located 2 hours away at the time that they believe these murders took place, but he's close to the time of the murders, close to the location, and happens to have turned off his phone or put it on some other setting during the time of the murder. So it's all these types of things that it's like, listen, there's nothing about this evidence that can exclude Bryan Kohberger. And that becomes, like, I forget who said it, but this kind of death by 1,000 cuts ability to put this circumstantial case together.
All excellent points there. Courtroom Confidential gifting 5 surviving survivor memberships. So thank you to Josh and Tiff, his better half. So Greg Scortis, to you, there was a good question from Vivian James. Who's he sending the selfie to? Should we be assured that the government has looked into that already to see, was this just stored on his phone, or did he actually send it to somebody? If he sent it to somebody, would that person be subpoenaed? I assume that they probably would be, correct?
Yeah, they probably would be. And if he did send it to someone in response to maybe their birthday or they graduated or did something, maybe it would put it in some context. And absolutely, you would want someone that received this photograph at or near the time it was taken, because that would shoot a hole in the government's theory that this was sort of a trophy type thing. I would assume if they had such a person, we would know that by now. Maybe Tara knows more about that than I do. It appears to me consistent with someone. I mean, if I was describing this photograph just from having practiced law for 43 years, I would say this is a picture of a man who thinks he just got away with murder. He's got the earbuds on. He's been listening. There's no police chaos going on. Nobody's called him. He's home, took a shower, did whatever, and he thinks he's in the clear. So I mean, this photograph. I mean, and the defense could say, no, he just he had a good day, had a good night's sleep, and he's telling his friends, hey, another day, that type of thing. But it would be helpful, like you said, Joel, at the outset of this question, if he had a recipient of this photograph who could put it in some context other than what we're all talking about, which is the trophy for the person that just got away with a very serious crime.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have a nightmare about this photo, by the way, tonight. But here is I believe this is Kaylee Goncalves' father, Steve Goncalves, talking to NBC News and the COE's friend, Ellison Barber. Here we go.
Trophy. He made himself a trophy. He felt like at that point he had just returned from the crime scene. There was no one there. And he believed, very confident, that's what the thumbs up. He's going to look back at that, remember what he got away with. And, it's a challenge to Idaho to let everybody know that, he thought he could kill people in our state, get away with it. He was far smarter than everyone else around him. And, he studied it. He's trying to be a PhD in it. So I think it was a challenge to Idaho. And I think Idaho will definitely step up. And he's going to regret that photo.
Tara, I would say that Steve Goncalves has been to hell and back, but the back part hasn't happened yet. I mean, this is still going on. I'm just wondering, what kind of pressure do you feel as the government, as a prosecutor here, to get a conviction for these families? The Goncalves family has been particularly outspoken. They say they want the death penalty here. They want to exact justice, and who can blame them? So what kind of pressure do you think that puts on a guy like Bill Thompson, the Ladog County prosecutor, to make sure that all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed?
Well, as I, and speaking as a former state and federal prosecutor myself, I can tell you that victims' cases are really the hardest cases for a number of reasons, including that there are emotions tied to it. I mean, these are people that have been wronged by other people. It's why we have the system that we do, is for prosecutors and the government to be able to protect society in a lot of ways from dangers and from dangerous people, and assure that there's order and not chaos. And so it's easier to do that when you just have a case file that's cold and you don't have a victim involved, and you're dealing with something that's more arm's length or more transactional. But in a case like this, especially where you've got 4 very young victims, I can't imagine as a parent what they're going through at all. I really can't. And as a prosecutor, your ultimate job, though, is you can't bring a case that you think that you're going to lose. So you need to have the evidence, and you need to have ethically a belief that you have enough to secure a conviction. That doesn't mean that we presume guilt. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you have an ethical duty, and you have to be really diligent about separating the pressure from law enforcement, from families, from victims in the case. So it's a hard job. And especially in a case that has a lot of press like this one does, I'm sure they're feeling the pressure. And I'm sure that, they're trying to be as diligent as possible to cross all the T's and dot all the I's, not only for the reason that people are watching, but also because, remember, this is a death penalty case. And it's very likely, I would put money on it, that if there is a conviction, there's going to be an appeal. And the appellate court is going to look down at the trial court level, and the defense is going to be pointing out to this error or that error, perceived errors. And the prosecution is going to have to defend that. And so, they want to be careful for any number of reasons here.
Hey, Josh, to you, and then I got a follow up, but Isagal comes to us from Turkey, Istanbul. I'm safe. Nice to be back listening to you. Can't Bryan Kohberger just say it's about the selfie? It's none of your business what time and type of photo I take. Many people take bathroom photos before work. Look psycho in a photo. Can't be an argument, right? So she's asking them, they can't get up there and just say he looks like a psycho here. They've got to have a little more depth to the argument.
Yeah, absolutely. And in his defense, I imagine, will say some form of that, like, listen, this is just a photograph. Just because he happened to have taken a selfie, which hundreds of thousands of people do several times a day, does not make him guilty of murder. And I'm sure they will make that argument. I mean, the other thing is, as Greg pointed out, depending on who he was sending this to, if he was sending it to anyone, there might be a very good reason for why he's taking a photo with a thumbs up. But that's really not the problem for the prosecution as far as admissibility. I still think there's a lot of relevance to it by saying it's very close in time to when they believe the murders were taking place, and ID is at issue here in this case, and then just let the jurors draw their conclusions. I mean, there's a lot, depending on how cheeky they want to get, there's a lot they could do with that photograph. I'm thinking if I had the officer who recovered the photograph on the stand and we're talking about the photograph, I might throw in there, he doesn't entirely look like a well-rested person, does he? Does that look like a person who may have been up all night and, objection, blah, 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 fine, move on from that. I'm sorry, Your Honor. But I mean, I think the jurors are going to be able to do exactly what we're doing and draw the conclusions we are when looking at that photograph.
Those are great points. Follow up, Josh, because that was not my question. It was Icicle's, but this is again sort of like inside baseball that I'm curious about. So the defense, back to the bushy eyebrow debate, which is kind of one and the same with the selfie photo. They basically argued, number one, they say, well, he doesn't have bushy eyebrows, and here's the photo. So I mean, it's up to individual discretion here, but they say he doesn't have bushy eyebrows, and then the defense goes on, and they say that DM, the surviving roommate, was quote unquote sleepy, maybe even drunk, and influenced by her own artwork. Do you make arguments but this is my question. Do you make arguments in court where you just know it sounds crazy, it's going to come off sounding crazy, but you got to make the argument anyway? Like this whole thing about being an art student. And this is no offense to 3 lawyers on my panel, but this is why a lot of people say they hate lawyers, because they'll just say anything. But sometimes you got to say something, right? I mean, you got to say something. But I mean, I guess my question is, like, what is that experience like when you have to make an argument that might just come across as either callous or totally ridiculous, but you got to make it anyway?
Why are you asking me that? Why are you asking me about ridiculous arguments?
Because, I don't know. You're in LA. So it's like Miami.
I mean, I think, I mean, sometimes you do. Sometimes you get lucky too. Sometimes you make an outlandish argument and maybe the judge goes along with it. And to Tara's point, this is a death penalty case. They're going to make objections and bring up every possible issue that they can to preserve all of that, because if there is a conviction and a sentence of death in this case, it absolutely will be appealed. And they want to just make sure that they're leaving no stone unturned. So yeah, they're going to make every argument, no matter how kind of outlandish and ridiculous. It's obvious here that one of the stronger, there is no identification. There's no eyewitness to this crime. And the closest you get is that one witness who says, I saw someone, gives a description, talks about bushy eyebrows. So of course they're going to try to go after that person as heavily as they possibly can. But the great kind of, to me, the irony of it is that as much as they protest about this person, it makes it even more relevant why the prosecution would have to bring in this photo to talk to that witness about it. Because if you go, well, what does bushy eyebrows mean? We don't think he has bushy eyebrows. Fine. Here's a photograph of the defendant close in time to when we believe the murders took place. Are those eyebrows consistent with what you have described as bushy eyebrows? Yes, they are. I mean, you could see every way in which their attacks against this eyewitness would make this photograph even more relevant.
Robin Ray here. Thank you. Gifting 5 Surviving the Survivor memberships. As the sign behind me says, best guest, better community. You got Fairy Glam Psychologist often in the chat. Welcome. Panel thoughts, Greg Scortis, on whether the death penalty is going to be taken off the table. I mean, one of the things that came up too is that he's on the autism spectrum. I think there's a lot of questions about that. Like, where did they come up with this diagnosis? No one. Shout out to Best Nancy, who also gifted 5 Surviving the Survivor memberships. Very kind of everyone. Ned Smith. Look at this. People on a roll today. Look at this. So what do you think, Greg? Ultimately, does the death penalty get taken off here, or is this like just tailor-made for the death penalty?
It's tailor-made for the death penalty, but let me say this, having prosecuted death penalty cases, if the victims' families, and this would require probably 4 out of 4, came to the prosecution and said, if he pleads guilty and agrees to a life in prison without the possibility of parole, we are willing to forego the trial. Now, I think that's a stretch, and I don't know that even the prosecution would go along with that. But to me, that would be the only way the death penalty would be taken off the table, is with the consent of the victims' families and an assurance that this means Kohberger pleads guilty to everything. Otherwise, I don't see any if you can't do a death penalty for a quadruple homicide, then maybe you shouldn't have a death penalty in the state of Idaho. And they do, and it's made for the worst cases. And something like this, I mean, it's 4 homicides in some states will give you the moniker of a serial killer. I mean, this is really bad. And so, again, I don't see the death penalty coming off the table because there's no benefit to the prosecution to take it off the table. And frankly, Joel, if the jury unanimously finds him guilty of 4 homicides, they probably don't have much choice but to impose the penalty of death. I mean, unless he's just so his autism or some other background factor that he's got is so compelling that they think, well, he should just spend the rest of his life in prison. So I don't see that coming off the table.
And it's interesting, Tara, by the way, shout out to Isagul again in Istanbul, gifting 50 Surviving the Survivor memberships. Very generous. Thank you so much. Shout out to my friend Wesley John Holmes, an Aussie living in Tokyo. Tara, what about that? I think if I understood Greg correctly, like the only maybe possible scenario is if he does admit guilt to every one of the murders and everything else he's accused of. Most people who are in this world of criminology and profiling don't think he's the kind that's ever going to do that. But would that be his only chance, in your opinion, that he would have to avoid the death penalty? Or could there be some sort of medical diagnosis that helps him along?
I agree with Greg. I don't think that there's going to be a medical diagnosis. The autism argument that he made, and the case that he cited you specifically, that's been kind of the newest thing that has come up recently. I don't think they're going to prevail on that at all. I don't think that's going to take death penalty off the table. The case they cited to had to do with, someone who was a extremely low IQ. It was like a 70 or 71. And, it was just a different scenario altogether than autism. I haven't found a case that was specific to autism that, would take death penalty off the table. So yeah, if he came in and he told the government or through his attorneys that he was willing to just plead guilty to everything and, life without parole and all of that, maybe the government would go for it. On the other hand, I mean, they're months from trial at this point. There's been a lot of time spent on this case. If the government feels very strongly about its evidence, and again, we haven't seen all the evidence. What we have right now are briefings back and forth, but nothing is in evidence until it's admitted at trial. But if the government feels strongly about its case and strongly about, kind of the worst of the worst type of case, they might proceed forward anyways and say, well, that's fine. You can plead guilty, but we're still going into phase 2, the sentencing phase, and we're going to pursue the death penalty.
And again, the Goncalveses, I know, want that. I'm not sure if the other families, one has said they're not seeking that, I believe. But that they're not looking to have him put to death, but definitely the Goncalveses have said that. Josh Ritter, you're going to ask me why I'm asking you this one too, but you're a very well-groomed man. Someone suggested that you are the centerfold of the STS calendar, which will happen one day. Will his attorneys, this is fascinating, have his brows trimmed? Something that never ever crossed my mind till Paulette brought it up. If you're his defense attorney, are you going in there with either tweezers or some other mechanism, a manscaping device to trim down those eyebrows a little bit, Josh Ritter? Or is that foul play?
I mean, it's kind of a more interesting question than you initially think, because I mean, at one point, I mean, listen, there's nothing wrong with him getting a haircut and getting cleaned up for trial, right? But if they dramatically try to alter his appearance, that could easily backfire, because again, then the prosecution's not going to be asking anybody, the gentleman who's sitting in here in court, are his eyebrows consistent? They're going to say, is the photograph consistent? And then again, we get that photograph in, which I think, is important to them. And then you've got the situation where it looks as though he's trying to alter his appearance because he knows that's important to the case, specifically his eyebrows. I mean, it'd be the same thing if he came in with a beard and dyed hair. They'd be going, well, he's obviously changed how he looks. That's not how he looked at the time that you identified him. I worked on a really awful gang homicide where the man who committed the murder was a hardened gang member. He had a shaved head. He had tattoos all over his head. And when he came to court, he had grown out his hair and he was wearing a suit. And I'm not joking when I say, when I first walked in, I thought he was one of the other attorneys waiting for the case to be called, because he had so altered the way that he appeared from what he was the day that he had committed the murders. So again, that can backfire if they're not careful about it.
Wow, that's tattoo head guy. He grew his hair out. Is that what you said?
Yeah, tattoos all over his shaved head of gang tattoos. But when he came into court, I swear he looked like a tax attorney sitting there.
Being an attorney must be fun. Maybe my next life. So, Greg, another interesting question. A lot of great questions tonight. Shari Douglas asked, he was wearing a mask that night, and that's how DM identified him. Would there be any scenario where the government can ask him to put a mask on to see if he looks like the person that she saw that evening, or is that highly prejudiced? I mean, obviously the defense is going to object to that, but is there a scenario where that might happen?
I would doubt that very seriously. I mean, we remember OJ trying to slip the glove on. If it don't fit, you must acquit. But that was his defense attorneys that did that. And they did that to show that maybe he wasn't the person. So the government can't, well, first of all, the government can't even put him on the stand. If he does choose to testify and they cross-examine him, I don't see any way that a judge would require him to do something like put a mask on so that a witness or somebody could say, oh yeah, that's the person I saw. I could be wrong. I don't see any way you could do that, Joel.
Josh Ritter, by the way, on Courtroom Confidential. If you haven't checked it out, please do. You have a premiere tonight. What is that? What's
yeah.
Well, when everybody's done watching here, don't go anywhere. But when you're done watching here, we're doing a premiere of an interview we sat down with Derek Lavasser from Crime Weekly. He's a really interesting guy. This is the gentleman that won Big Brother and then went on to get involved in YouTube and true crime and everything else. So we're doing that. That's premiering this evening if everybody wants to check it out. Thank you for that, Joel. Appreciate it.
That is Courtroom Confidential. La Mesa Filipino Food Club from Toronto. I think he couldn't resist driving back to the crime scene. He could not stay away. What do we, the panel, think? I mean, what do you think, Tara? I know you don't like to get kind of like subjectively involved, but if it is true that he was in that area, which is what the government says, and again, the defense is saying something different. By the way, Cindy comes to us from Pullman in Spokane this week, so right next door and right where Kohberger went to school. But what about that, Tara?
Whether or not he drove back to the scene, I mean, maybe. Yeah. I'm no psychologist. I don't even play one on TV. So it's just, we've seen all sorts of people do bizarre things. I think in cases that are publicized like this one, of going back to the scene or hanging around the scene to see what is going on or what kind of attention is drawn, or, taking selfies is a new one. But yeah, he could have. Is it within the realm of possibility? Certainly it is. What would compel somebody to go back to the scene of the crime in that way? I don't know. I have no idea. So,
by the way, we have 3 big trials we're going to cover sort of back to back with a tiny break. But in very end of April, Corey Richens, and I'm planning to go out there for that. That's in Park City or thereabouts. And then Donna Adelson the following month in June. And then a little break in July. And then in August, I have bought my tickets already and I have my hotel already, and I'll be in Boise. Right now, I'm for the first 10 days of the trial. this trial, the one with Bryan Kohberger. So we will have it on STS. It's going to be a monster. I mean, 3 months and change. So I think we're going to cover the big days. Don't know that we will do every single day, but the COE, Steve Cohen, Space Coast, and myself will figure that out. Are there rulings yet? Yeah. So the ruling is that the court is actually going to stream this, which I love because you don't have to deal with the media as a guy once in the media, traditional media. It might be on a bit of a delay. And per Kevin Fixler at the Idaho Statesman, there are no press credentials. There is no no preferential treatment at all here. It is first come, first serve. And this is going to be a trial where, like OJ Simpson, people will travel to watch this trial. I can assure you that.
Do they know how big the courtroom is, Joel? Like, do they have any idea?
I don't know. Taro, do we know? Do you know? Is it going to be the same one as Lori Vallow?
It might be. That's one of the larger courtrooms. That would be my guess. And they were already able to do all the logistics for how do we get people in and media and all of that. So that would be my guess. Yeah,
it's going to be an absolute zoo, I think, in Boise. I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this case. Shout out to the super planner girl. She's recovering with a health issue. Hope she's feeling better, and she's a big help behind the scenes. So another sort of big issue here, a couple more things to cover, and then we'll let you go watch Josh Ritter's premiere. But the Amazon knife purchase. So Josh, we heard about searches on Amazon, but now the government basically came out and has said that he bought a K-bar knife, a sheath, and a sharpener on Amazon, supporting Jeff Bezos back in March of 2022. How incriminating. Jeff Bezos needs a few more dollars, so let's all support him at Amazon. Anyway, I got distracted for a minute. So this K-bar knife, he buys it in March of 2022. Josh Ritter, do you think Jeff Bezos, like, it comes toward the end of the month and he's like, wonder if my mortgage payment, if I'm
let me check my receipts. Yeah, let me balance my checkbook real quick.
What a wild world that must be. Literally, that dude could spend as much money as he wants every day for the rest of his life, and he could never spend it.
He could go to Disney World, no problem.
You know what? He could pay to have someone go to Disney World for him. And that's what I would do. Who's like a doppelganger. That's for sure. He could do that. And somehow he could have the exact same DNA infused into that person. That's what I would be doing. Here is the second soundbite. The COE worked hard to get it. So this is the second soundbite now with Steve Goncalves, Kaylee's father here. This goes back to the Selfie.
It's very hard. You kind of just prepare your family, tell them to stay away from the TV, stay away from, parts of the internet. So, but it's nice to get this information out. It's good to see the facts. I mean, it's weird to wait 2.5 years to know, like, some of the final things that, your child has been through. We're still waiting on even like laptops and things that, so we can see, her playlist and things that she was working on. It's tough. It's tough to go through this, but I just think of all the officers and, the FBI agents and all the hard work that they put into this. So, I can wait and, we can get this out. We can figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, again, just heartbreaking. In the early days, Steve Goncalves was very vocal. And I remember some detectives, even on my show, were saying that he should kind of not be so much in the media spotlight. But my take is that happens to your daughter. You do what you need to do to get whatever you need to get out there. And all these families are going to be, and who knows? I don't know that. I mean, I'm sure the Goncalveses will be there. I don't know if all the other families will be there, and it's going to go on for probably 2-3 months. So it's going to be a massive trial, and it's going to be tough for sure on these families, and tough for other people just to watch. But Josh, back to was I asking you? I think I was asking you, Josh. So I'll just go back to you. So now they're basically saying, look, he bought this K-bar knife. He also bought a knife sharpener and the sheath back on March 2022, which is obviously April, May, June, July, August, September, October, eight months before the murders. And we know that the sheath is probably the most incriminating piece of evidence with his touch DNA on it. How important is it now going from searching for a K-bar knife to the receipts from Amazon that he actually, purchased that knife?
I think it's huge. I mean, we went through kind of a blackout of information from this case for so long because of all the, gag orders and everything else. And then we just get this flood of information recently. But the idea that they say that they can track down a purchase of a knife that is believed to be the murder weapon that matches the sheath that was covered at the scene, and that they have a receipt, the receipts, and can tie that to him, I think is huge, because this whole case for the defense, in my view, has been about that DNA on the knife sheath. And they've tried to attack it and challenge it legally and say, listen, that, foundationally, we don't feel it should come in. We feel there are, problems in the way that the search was conducted and the IGG and all of that. And all of that has come to a dead end with the judge. So the only other way they have of attacking it is giving some innocent explanation as to why their client's DNA ends up on this knife sheath. And maybe there was an argument if you couldn't ever put a knife in this person's possession. But now that you have a receipt showing that he purchased a knife that matches that sheath and is believed to be that same, here's the other thing we haven't thought about. I don't know if there's any identifying marks on these sheaths that they can say whether or not that is in fact the same purchase sheath. That would be incredible to me. But even without that, it's the idea that they can put a similar knife in his possession before these murders, I think all but closes the door on any argument that defense might be able to make, unless the defense has, him selling it on eBay. If they're able to produce some witness who says, oh, he gave that knife to me as a gift, and he gave it to me 3 months before these murders take place, everyone is going to put together the idea that that knife was in his possession at the time these murders took place.
That this part is fascinating. Greg, to you. So the defense came out when they brought this up and the DNA and some other stuff, and they basically said, hey, look, the government here is quote unquote cherry picking. I mean, how can you say that? Again, this is one of these things, like a defense attorney says something, but how can you, when you're talking about the murder weapon potentially, and that there's a receipt for it on Amazon, how can you with a straight face say that the government is cherry picking their evidence? And that was the exact terminology that they used.
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit, and I appreciate that all of your panelists today have done defense work. We know that you can't hold anything back, especially when it's a death penalty case, because you will be scrutinized for every decision you make and don't make. When the Idaho Supreme Court or the Ninth Circuit takes a look at it, or whoever's going to take a look at it down the road. So, you can call out the government for saying, look, you're not showing all of the evidence here. You're just cherry picking the things that you think are important. And maybe that'll be a defense, but it's only a good defense if the defense can establish that there is other evidence, that there's something else that they're not telling the jury about, that they're holding back on evidence. And absent that, the government can choose to, I wouldn't use the word cherry pick, but they could choose to put on the evidence that they find relevant in the case, so long as they disclose all the evidence to the defense and they're not withholding things that might be exculpatory. So I don't think that's a compelling argument. But again, when you're facing something like this as a defense attorney, you need to make the arguments that you think have the best chance of surviving and take your best shot.
Yeah. Someone in the chat, by the way, mentioned that they believe, which is, I haven't heard this take, which is interesting, is that the target was actually maybe Ethan Chapin, and that maybe there was some sort of lust for him. So that's interesting. I've never heard that before, but that's potentially plausible. And then someone, Mike Lattimore here. Shout out to all these new names, by the way. We do have the best community in all the YouTubes, not just true crime, but all of YouTube. So welcome to all the new people. We're typically on live 5 days a week, 7 o'clock Monday to Thursday, and Friday is always 12:30. With a wacky show on Fridays, but the times get kind of jiggled around because I end up having to go to Disney some days. But these are obviously the victims. This is tough for me to look at because they are not much older than my oldest daughter. I mean, a little bit older. But these guys have not even entered, as I have said before, the prime of their lives here, and everything was just taken from them. So super tragic. The COE also has. Let's do this. She has a 911 call. Last show we had the script, but the actual call had not come out yet. So let's listen to it together and just get the take on the power of this 911 call to jurors from the esteemed panel. Here's a 911 call. Here's a 911 call. COE, can you add it? It's not letting me add it. The magic touch.
11:55 a.m. 42 seconds, November 13, 2022.
911 location of your emergency.
Hi, something is happening. Something happened in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
What is the rest of the address?
Oh, Kings Road.
Okay. And is that a house or an apartment?
It's a house.
Can you repeat the address to make sure that I have it right?
I'll talk to you guys. We live at the White, so we're next to them.
I need someone to repeat the address for verification.
The address, 1122 King Road.
And what's the phone number that you're calling from?
What? 3731.
And tell me exactly what's going on.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night, and she's not waking up.
Okay.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Yeah. Hi,
and are you with the patient? Okay, I need someone to keep the phone, stop passing it around.
Can I just tell you what happened pretty much?
What is going on currently? Is someone passed out right now?
I don't really know, but pretty much at 4 a.m.
Okay, I need to know what's going on right now if someone is passed out. Can you find that out?
Yeah, I'll come. Come on, we gotta go check. But we have to. Is she passed out? She's passed out. What's wrong? She's not waking up.
Okay, one moment. I'm getting help started that way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and how old is she?
She's 20.
20, you said?
Yes, 20. Here,
okay.
Hello? Hello?
Okay, I need someone to stop passing the phone around because I've talked to 4 different people.
Okay, sorry, they just gave me the phone.
Is she breathing?
Hello?
Is she breathing?
No.
Okay.
Bethany, The line needs you to keep talking to them. Say, I can't talk to them. They need you to talk to them.
Hello.
Okay. I've already sent the ambulance and law enforcement. Stay on the line. If there is a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it.
Say that again. There's a police here right now.
Okay. If there is a defibrillator available, send someone to get it now and tell me when you have it.
We don't have one. I think yes. Do you have a defibrillator? Yes, we have one.
Are you talking to the officer?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to let you go since he's there with you and can help you.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay.
11:59 a.m. 49.
That is Tara, very difficult. What do you make of that call? The one thing that strikes me, other than the sheer terror, is we don't hear the word blood again. And she's looking directly at one of the victims here, but there's obviously absolute terror. The phone gets handed around. That's going to be incredibly powerful to a jury. What do you, as a defense attorney, what do you take away from this?
Well, they're gonna point out what hasn't been done, what's not on the call, and this is going to go to their cross-examination of the state's witnesses. So one of the main issues is going to be credibility of the witnesses that were the remaining roommates that were in the house. And so they're going to try and use I would imagine they would try and use the 911 call, and what they saw at the time, what they observed at the time when they entered into the house as a point for cross-examination. But it's really powerful. And I mean, you can hear the fear in their voices in this call. You can hear the tone of their voices. I think what the call really does is drive home how young these individuals are. I mean, they don't know what to do. There's confusion at the scene. We don't hear who goes into the actual rooms and what they see at all. We just hear that law enforcement is there right away. It's a small town. And so I'm not surprised that law enforcement was able to arrive so quickly, but I don't think the lack of details in this call, like a play-by-play of what they're seeing, takes away from the power of it.
I agree with that completely. Ritter, your thoughts on that, but also one other thing, just back to the knife, and then I got one or two more things, but I'll have you answer both. The other thing that's very troubling for the defense is that apparently with that purchase of the knife on Amazon, the sharpener and the sheath, sometime after the murders are committed, Bryan Kohberger searches for a replacement knife / sheath after the murders. I mean, that seems to be really incriminating. It's kind of been discussed in passing, but a guy that's looking for a replacement sheath on a knife that is used in a crime where the knife sheath was left behind, isn't that one of the more important pieces of evidence potentially?
Oh, absolutely. Because why are you searching for a knife sheath again if you aren't missing the one that you previously had? And why are you looking to replace that one if you don't think it might become an issue, the fact that there's a knife sheath missing from an order that you had purchased previously, and where's that knife and everything else? You could almost see the gears turning in his head where he was perhaps thinking, would it be best for him to replace that? Is it going to look bad if he replaces it? What questions might be asked? Because I think he started to piece together at some point, at least, that I left something behind that was very important if he didn't realize it immediately. So yeah, I think that was a good point that we missed earlier. That his entire history when it comes to searching for knives on the internet is going to be a problem for his defense for sure. But as far as that 911 call goes, I think the surviving roommates have received a lot of, I feel, very unfair heat online and the Twitter sphere, and people kind of coming after them. And listen, there are some curiosities as to what was happening that morning. I mean, why did it take them so long to call? Why do they not immediately know that it's a murder? all of these things that I think are curious, but I think unfair too, because we're not, I think we're all reacting to this as the people that we are now. If I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw a man with a mask on and bushy eyebrows, I would react very differently than if I were a 20-year-old living in a house that probably has people coming and going out of that house at strange hours all day long while I'm in college. And the way that they are, all kind of panicked, and it doesn't appear as though anyone has really physically checked on their roommates at the time they're making this 911 call. All of it is curious, but I think understandable given who they are, their age at the time, the what they're going through. And I think it, at the end of the day, is going to be very powerful evidence to the jury. Now, it may not, I don't know if it pushes the needle one way or the other as far as guilt or innocence of Bryan Kohberger, but I think it does put the jurors in kind of the just absolute nightmare that these surviving roommates woke up to the next morning.
Yeah, it is just unbelievably difficult to listen to. Greg Skordas, to you, just back to the alibi, and then one other thing, and then I promise we will wrap it up with final thoughts. This is another kind of interesting game of chess. So they came out, the defense, with an alibi for Bryan Kohberger. They were up against a deadline way back when, and they basically said, he was out, he enjoyed driving alone at night. There are no witnesses to back this up. Now, the defense says that they're going to plan to use cell phone experts for what they call partial corroboration. What the hell does that mean? Partial corroboration. I mean, either you were there and cell phone pings show it. I mean, the government says that they've got pings showing that he was around the house at the time, again in the morning. Isn't this like digital forensic science? I mean, how's the defense here going to say there's partial corroboration? And in return, the government said, well, if you go with this alibi, we're calling, we're going to try to call Bryan Kohberger to the stand.
Well, it's not that easy. The state can't put Bryan Kohberger on the stand. I don't know how he would open a door that would allow them to do that. But I guess what you're talking about with the cell phone pinging is that there probably are some times when he was on or using his cell phone when he was not near the scene, and maybe putting the state to its burden of saying, well, you don't know what time these homicides took place. If you could sort of say, and medical examiners could often do some sort of timing as to a death and say, well, it occurred between 1 and 2 a.m. Maybe the defense has cell phone information that between 1 and 2 a.m. He was 20 miles away. And that would certainly be helpful for what they're describing as an alibi. So I think that the defense has its hands cut out for them, or its work cut out for them, I should say. But that would be my just surmising what they could get from the cell phone data that might help the defense.
If you don't know, we've started a second channel. We had a lot of our best guests come up to us wanting to participate in their areas of expertise. So it is at STS Talk, sort of fashioned after Sports Talk Radio, except with video as well. And one of the first people who is hosting a show is the Geo Profiler, who is a super cool dude and does interesting things. And you can check out tomorrow at 12 p.m. at STS Talk. Please subscribe there. And it's going to be cool once it's fully up and running, which is going to take a while, but it's going to happen. If you don't know Tara Malik, now you do. She is a defense attorney out of Boise, Idaho, pronounced with an S, not a Z, like a lot of New Yorkers say Boise, but I was told to say Boise, so that's how I say Boise. And I'm looking forward to meeting Tara when I am there, and Kevin Fixler, and who knows, maybe Ritter will come out, and Greg Skordas hopefully will be out there. Greg, you're going to cover it? You haven't gotten word yet, right?
I haven't got the word yet whether we'll be up there. I'd sure like to. Even just to meet you and Tara would be worth the drive.
Thank you. I'm sure they will ask you, because this is going to be mega big. It's going to be big. So Tara, your final thoughts. But before that, there's also a conflicting timeline. Now the defense says they have a new timeline, and they have, quote unquote, digital forensic proof here that the surviving roommates actually started making calls and getting on Instagram around 7:30 in the morning, not at 10:20 in the morning, which was originally the time that they thought they had kind of awakened and started getting active. We went over the text in a previous show, which were between 4:22 and 4:24. They're talking about how freaked out they are. What does the shift in the timeline do, if anything, to this case, that now it appears that the surviving roommates are communicating several hours earlier? And your final thoughts, Tara?
I think what it does is, going back to the issue of credibility of the witnesses that are going to be put on the stand by the government. So, and I mean both as far as the surviving roommates and also the work that law enforcement did. So, if you're poking holes from the defense side of things, you're going to poke holes everywhere that you can. And one of the places and one of the themes or narratives that you can use is that the investigation that was done was sloppy. And in order to show that the investigation that was done was sloppy, you're going to point to every mistake you believe that the investigators did along the way. Misidentified the car, miss this issue of when the communication started, the timestamps, and you start layering all of these things. And your conclusion is, how could you possibly trust these witnesses or this evidence when look at all the mistakes that they made along the way? So you're casting doubt. Or you're identifying and highlighting areas where the jury can find out. So it'll be interesting to see how the evidence shakes out at trial and what comes in, what doesn't.
Yeah, we do have the best guests in all true crime. Great show, great panel. By the way, special shout out to Gigi McKelvey, G Money. She hosts Pretty Lies and Alibis, another great podcast, and she digs deep, and she's the one who gave us the 911 calls out there, but comes from Gigi McKelvey's Pretty Lies and Alibis. Super cool, great woman, and a great mom, and a great daughter, great granddaughter, meaning a great granddaughter, not a great granddaughter. Greg Skordas, to you. The defense also wants the 911 call that we just listened to. They want that excluded. What are their chances? For those who do not know, Greg Skordas, you heard him say he's been practicing criminal defense and lawyering for 43 years. He started as a public defender. He doesn't look over 43 years old, so the math doesn't quite add up, but I'm looking forward to meeting Greg as well. What about the 911 call being excluded, and your final thoughts on this, Greg?
So in order to exclude something, the probative value has to be substantially outweighed by the risk of unfair prejudice. And I don't think it's particularly prejudicial. I don't think that the defense is going to have a good argument that it's going to so inflame or so upset the jury that they can't make a rational decision. It's relevant to what the kids were seeing at the time. It's relevant to the timing of finding the bodies. I think that it's got more relevance than prejudice. And so I think that's going to be a stretch for the defense to keep that out. I don't see the judge doing that.
And are you expecting any major drama between now and jury selection set for the very end of July?
Absolutely. I mean, both sides. I mean, the state, Joel, the state cannot lose this case. They cannot bring a homicide case against an individual and lose it. So they're going to put everything they can into it. And the defense, they're dealing with a man's life, a young man's life. And I've done that before from both sides. The stakes are so high that there's no telling what could happen between now and the time of this trial in August.
Yeah. By the way, if you like the show, please hit the like button. That's why it's called the like button. If you like the show, it makes sense, I think. You can subscribe as well. And we've got a Patreon link that the mods, and thank you to the mods. They are excellent and amazing at what they do. But hit like, subscribe, and Patreon if you want a little more STS in your lives. Josh Ritter, of course, the host of Courtroom Confidential. He's got a premiere coming up. Josh, tell everybody again what that is, where they can find it, and your final thoughts on this. What is sure this is going to be one of the more major trials in recent years, if not the most major trial. The media is going to be all over this. It's going to be a zoo. So what are your final thoughts and what are you expecting? But first, tell us about that premiere.
Thank you. Yeah, it's premiering now. So as soon as we're done here, please shoot over to Courtroom Confidential on YouTube. And it's a interview with Derek Levasseur from Crime Weekly. He's a fascinating dude. It was a fascinating interview. So I invite everybody to show up there and we'll be in the chat. My final thoughts on this is I really feel that there is much more evidence out there than we know about. And I think that we're finding that out in little drips and drabs here and there. But I mean, the idea that we got that selfie, and then before that, we have the Amazon receipts. I just feel like there has been such a gag on this entire case that when the trial actually plays out, we're going to find out that there's just far more evidence than we may have suspected beforehand. And I agree with you. I think it's probably going to be one of the more major cases that have taken place in recent memory because it's an absolute nightmare. I mean, it's like if you want to imagine what is the worst possible thing you can think of happening, it's 4 innocent young people's lives being taken in a way that involved a stabbing in the middle of the night by just some random person. I mean, it's like, you know, for parents watching this, for kids of the same age thinking about it, the idea that you can just go to sleep with not a care in the world and someone breaks into your home with the knife and kills you. I think that it just stirs up this kind of fear in all of us that we're just fascinated with it. We're fascinated with the fact that he was not caught for some period of time. Then they were finally able to find a suspect, and then how they're going to put that all together. The fact that the defense is fighting for, they believe, his life by fighting the death penalty on this case. It's going to be a very not only impactful and important case, but just a fascinating case to watch.
Really well said. An amazing panel tonight. One last thing. It is not an April Fool's joke, but I think on April 1st, that's when the Karen Reed trial starts. And you won't see any of it here because I'm not covering it because it's the most toxic, incestuous, polarizing, crazy case where no one even talks about Officer John O'Keefe. It's all Karen Reed all the time, and I'm sick of it. So we're going to do something else. We're going to have other content here at STS. So if you don't want it, no mas. If you don't want, everyone's picked up Karen Reed. What about John O'Keefe? Tired of it. I'm tired of it. Super sticker. Thank you, Denise, News Junkie. So we are going to have what they call alternate programming. And we'll let you know exactly what that's going to be when the Karen Reed trial starts. Not watching the doc. I don't care anymore. I care about John O'Keefe and what has happened in that Canton, Massachusetts town is ridiculous. The way these people have taken sides and the conspiracies and all this, it's just nauseating. So on that soapbox note, I will say goodnight. Coco, $3 super sticker. Thank you. Thanks to everybody out there. Love the guests and love the community even more. We will see you tomorrow, 2:30, Donna Adelson in court, and then 5 o'clock. Hopefully I'm in Orlando in time to host the show. If not, you'll get Joe Patuto and Dr. Melissa Hamilton, both law professors. So you will learn from the actual professors. See you tomorrow.